Hey guys, it's me Jacob, and this is the third/fourth video in my Python studying series. So over the weekend, between yesterday and today, I got about 18 hours of reading source code done. So I'm feeling pretty good about that. Of course, for those of you that don't know, it's not quite 18 hours. I do 45 minutes and I count that as an hour. And if I feel like chaining them together, then it's sort of like a reward for me. And if I don't, then it's like more of a reasonable pace, where you take like 15 minutes off and you do 45 minutes. So it's not actually strictly, 18 times 60 minutes. It's more like 18 times 45 minutes, where I'm including a lot of these things. I mean, it does make a difference if you really care about that, but for me, it helps me to motivate myself too, because I've always thought about everything in terms of hours, and hour is just a very long 45 minutes. It feels like 45 minutes is what an hour should have been, honestly. Instead of 24 hours, we could just have 24 plus a fourth of it, 30 hours in a day, but they were all 45 minutes. I think that's about the same. I'm not sure. I may have done that math wrong. But anyways, yeah, so I've been reading a lot of code, and it's hard, but it gets easier. There's this weird it feels like there's this sticking point with things, but especially with reading code. So you have to understand, I've done exercises where I read Python code from different libraries for a long time in my past. So this is nothing new to me. It was kind of new when I did it for JavaScript and TypeScript, because I hadn't really done that before with those languages all that much. But with Python, I've done this a lot before. So coming back to this is a lot like coming home in a lot of ways. It's fairly familiar to me. It's still hard, but not quite as hard, So there's nothing really new about my strategy. Everyone knows about my strategy at this point in time. But how do I feel about it? I feel pretty good about it, actually. There's this weird sensation that's kind of hard to articulate, but it's sort of like it's the feeling that you're moving in the right direction and you have less resistance for what you're doing, right? There's this different feeling where you're just struggling and your mind and your body are filled with resistance, where it's it doesn't fundamentally, it feels like it doesn't want to do the thing that you're doing. But at some point in time, this just kind of breaks down and you just sort of accept and embrace what you're trying to do. And with reading source code, that is trying to understand source code, trying to understand this huge permutation space, which is capable of doing all of the things you see on the internet. It's completely mind-blowing. The more time you spend at it, the more you're just yeah, I mean, it's not overwhelming. That's what's weird. It's not overwhelming because that's a negative word. It's more just it's mind-blowing. You just know that there's 100 times more out there for everything you see. So for everything you learn and understand, there's infinite more out there happening in a just distributed way. And that is the mathematics of that are the same as looking at the stars in the sky and feeling the existential implications of that. But I'm not really, the thing with code is you can pick your little ecosystem to sort of specialize in. For me, it's Python, right? With a splash of JavaScript and TypeScript, but it's mostly Python. I'm learning the other things because they're so pragmatic. But the deeper I get into Python, the more I'm like, maybe you don't even need that. Um, but I picked this sort of strategy. Um, but yeah, I added a couple more repos today. And I improved my service a little bit because I was getting annoyed with some of the stuff, so I just made some changes and then redeployed it. But yeah, the repos I added today was the Sentry API, no, the Sentry Python SDK, and the Zulip server library, plus everything else. Pretty crazy. I mean, it's just insane how mature some of these projects are. How many people are on them? There are probably people on some of these projects that are, just like way beyond where I am. And they're like one out of hundreds of people that have contributed to the project. That's mind-blowing to me. I guess that's the word for this video, is mind-blowing. So anyways, the strategy is still the same. I have more confidence about what I'm doing today than I did yesterday. And I guess I'm filled with a little bit more conviction. I just have conviction. If I actually read all of this stuff, it's just I don't see how it doesn't transform me in a way that is hugely beneficial. I think that I'm capable of doing these sort of things. This stuff is takes a certain level of persistence and patience and I don't know, discipline / it's not discipline at this point. It's just literal grind. You just I'm not sure exactly how to express it, but I think I'm not smarter than other people, but you do get more knowledge when you're willing to go for greater, when you're willing to sacrifice more to do something. It pays off. One thing I learned a lot, I used to be a competitive musician a long time ago. One thing though that I always learned was there's no way, you can't outsmart someone who practiced 1,000 hours more than you. I mean, maybe the more and more you have accumulated in terms of practice time, there can be diminishing returns, right? So maybe if both you and the other person practiced 4,000 hours and then they practiced another 1,000 hours, maybe it reached the point where it was diminishing returns and you did it smarter, or you're just more talented or something, and you end up playing with more precision than them, or I don't know, whatever. Music is sort of weird because it's so subjective, right? But anyways, man, what was I trying to say? How does that relate to what I'm talking about here? Man, I can't remember now. I was talking about 1,000 hours. We were talking about reading code, but then we were also talking about practicing music. And I was trying to make the point that oh right. Basically I was trying to say that a huge amount of the advantage that comes, the huge amount of human intelligence and knowledge comes from exposure and practice. Practice is another word for exposure, honestly. The more you are exposed to something, the more you anticipate intuitively, within your mind. It's not something you're processing. It's something that you've sponged into another layer of your mind, right? You're not crunching through the numbers. You're more just recognizing patterns, executing things that are well within your intuition, right? And I do think that there's like a degree of talent related to stuff where it's like two different people both spend 1,000 hours doing the same thing and they have slightly different outcomes. One is slightly above the other. I do think that it's not as significant as the literal commitment of exposure and time that you have to whatever you're trying to do, right? And that's what I was trying to say. Anyways, that was a really long tangent. Oh, geez, 10 minutes already. Yeah, there's a lot of code here. There's a lot of projects. A lot of them are related to, WebSockets and HTTP and are asynchronous. Some of them are related to other types of networking, like very general purpose. Others are like focused sort of on cryptocurrency in the sense of trying to connect to Ethereum, but specifically through the Web3 API or the Web3 repo has like all different types of networking ways to connect with Ethereum. So like RPC, HTTP, probably WebSockets too. I'm not really sure, but and then you have, then you have the big apps, man. The library SDK is huge. Sentry is huge. I don't know if you guys know Sentry, but it's all open source, and it's just this. It's mostly made with Python. It's incredible to me. These projects are like mostly made in Python, and presumably they look like they're fairly profitable, but I don't spend my time researching that, so I can't really speak to that. But they are large. They have a huge amount of human effort behind them. And the other one is, so there's library, which has library SDK, which has a lot of stuff in it. There's Sentry, which has, a bunch of stuff with it. It's basically about like capturing errors that you don't. It's like it's a logical thing. I actually did a lot of this in my own projects. One of the first projects I did for my websites was make a monitoring tool which would like log. It would capture through RabbitMQ events, right? So Sentry is like this, but on super steroids. It's like taking it to the maximum depth and maturity. Crazy. But then the last one that I found today is called Zulip, which is really appealing to me because it's a chat server, basically. It's like a Slack competitor or a Microsoft Teams competitor, but it's got a huge amount of Python in it, which is super interesting to me. So I'm going to go through that too. And so that's basically the plan. Sorry I had that huge mind blurb. Yeah, I can't control that. I'm glad I got back on track eventually. I had to talk myself all the way back to what I was really, the context I was originally in. But yeah, so I'm just gonna keep doing this. I think it's gonna be good. It took me around 100 hours for JavaScript to really kick into gear last time, and it was like right at the tail end. I was starting to feel more fluent with reading it. I already feel like I'm getting there much faster with this, but I think that the ceiling for this is going to be much higher. I think I was just starting to get into the fluency with JavaScript and TypeScript, but with this one, it's going to be much greater ceiling. So anyways, thanks for watching, guys. Let you guys go, and I'll try and keep you updated over the next couple days.